Everybody, welcome to Sunday Morning Live. I'm your host, Aaron Tomlinson. You can see that my background is a little bit different. If you look closely, you can tell that I'm in a hotel room today. I've got the camera angled this way because if I do it this way, get a bunch of glare and reflection off that mirror. So, gotta love these drapes. But anyway, didn't want to miss today. I am on sort of a retreat or sabbatical this week, getting off by myself in order to get a lot of work done. A lot of things that I've been putting off that I'm ready to no longer procrastinate, but to get towards. Last week had an incredible class. Thank you for those of you that participated online. Class that I called Unleashing Your Best Self. I'll be making that available soon, I hope. That's part of the reason that I'm getting away this week and looking forward to this fall being able to just do some new things and create some new content and get really serious about it. And as one of my mentors from Appalachia used to say, get her done. And I think that was before who was the guy? Some comic made that popular. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to get her done. That's the point. So I'm going to take a minute and just see if I can this time around adjust my settings or if it's still going to be weird about it. Let's see. Yeah, it just doesn't let me make the changes that I used to. So I have to do it after. I'm going to try real quick on here. 1 second. Running a little bit late today, but that's okay. See if it'll let me do it here. Oh, let me see. Maybe I can do it this way. Trying to change my audience for some reason. I used to be able to go in and it would just let me edit my audience. And for some reason now it keeps my audience to friends only, which makes it impossible to share to other groups. All right. First world problems. Definitely an Aaron problem that you don't need to know about, right? Okay, so let's just jump into this. So the title that I'm doing this morning is Start Over with Why. And I put over in parentheses because I'm assuming that at least some of you out there are familiar with the book Start With Why from Simon Sinek. I think I'm saying his last name correct. Did a TED Talk also that went absolutely viral. Best-selling book, Start With Why. It's written to really facilitate leaders and organizations about the importance of the why of a group or the importance of the why of an organization. And certainly it applies to individuals as well. And so I wanted to explore the question, and I put in parentheses, start over with why, because the truth is that all of us and our whys started a long time ago. Everything that we do is born of some kind of a why, because everything that we do is motivated. There is a motivation behind every thought, every action, every step that we take in our lives. Something is motivating us. Something is motivating us to do what it is that we do. And oftentimes I have found as a counselor, as a therapist, and I think this is also validated in the research, that very often we don't know what our why is. We don't know why we're doing what we're doing. We don't know why we keep thinking the same thoughts. A person that goes from one bad relationship into the next bad relationship might be asking themselves, why am I doing this? And to a large degree, when it comes to therapeutic change, this is going to sound a little contradictory. I don't mean it to be contradictory or even paradoxical. I just mean that it's nuanced. For a lot of people, they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing, and they're seeking the why because they're looking for the cause. Because if they can change the cause, then they can change the effect. Now, there are certain circumstances under which knowing the why is completely irrelevant. And perhaps even in most circumstances, knowing the why isn't as important as the process. What is the process or the how that I am doing what I'm doing? But involved in that process, ultimately, there is going to be a motivation. And that motivation is going to come from some sense of purpose. So let me just look real quick. I took a couple notes. So in the book, Simon Sinek identifies or defines why as your core purpose, cause, or belief. What is your core foundational purpose, cause, or belief? Your deepest purpose, your deepest cause, your deepest beliefs. It says identify the purpose or belief that drives you because it is the foundation for everything that you do. So we can go through something in life and say, why did this happen to me? Why am I acting like this? Why does this keep happening? And oftentimes those are questions that can't be answered or that are counterproductive. This is certainly the case when we try as people to answer the question of the problem of evil, right? And for a lot of people, that's how they deconstructed from the idea of a benevolent creator, a benevolent source altogether. If there was a creator, a source, a higher power that was all powerful and all good, classic argument, right? Then you can't be all powerful and all good at the same time because obviously evil exists. There's obviously imperfections in creation itself. There are, for example, most people don't know this, but I'm almost completely blind in my left eye. And I was born that way. So that would be an imperfection, right? That presumably, if I have allegiance to a creator, that comes from a creator. And so something bad happens and we say, why did this happen? And whether we believe in God or don't believe in God, there really isn't necessarily a good answer to the why. And seeking that out can be unproductive. However, when we want to make change in our life, when we want to make positive change in our life, and quite frankly, if we want to positively impact the people that we're showing up for, positively impact the people in our lives, then knowing our core purpose, that thing that drives us, that thing that motivates us, our core purpose, knowing what cause are we serving, what is our core belief, these can be super important because we are doing what we're doing right now out of a sense of purpose, out of a sense of cause, whether we admit it or not, whether we realize it or not. And here's the important part, whether we are really conscious of it or not, because most of the time we're completely unconscious, completely asleep to what set us in motion. And oftentimes we didn't have any choice in that. Sadly, this is just a truth of human behavior. Many of us can become like that wind-up toy or that wind-up toy, that gets wound up by someone else, by someone else's beliefs, by someone else's ideas, by someone else's cause or purpose, their why, and then gets set in motion. And we just keep going that direction, winding down, doing the same thing day after day after day. I looked at a study this week that, and I've heard this, stated over and over, being a therapist, clinical therapist, being interested in psychology, self-improvement, self-help, helping other people to improve and change their lives. And so the statistic is that 95% of the thoughts that we think in a day are repetitive. I want you to think about that for a minute. 95% of the thoughts that we think in a day are repetitive. We think the same thoughts over and over and over and over and over and over and over, 95%, which means internally every day is essentially the same day. It might be different weather outside. There might be a different set of circumstances. There might be things that surprise us that go on throughout the day. But internally, we are thinking and feeling the same thing over and over and over, like that wind-up toy, right? Like that person on a treadmill, or the rat in the maze, not the rat in the maze, the the rat on the wheel, the hamster on the wheel, right? Internally, just stirring over and over and over and over. And our thoughts and feelings create this sort of feedback loop. My thoughts affect how I feel, and how I feel affects my thoughts. So this works for us or against us. If I'm having negative, critical, condemning thoughts, shame-based thoughts, that's going to produce negative, critical, shame-based feelings. And guess what? If I have negative, shame-based feelings, they're going to produce negative, shame-based thoughts, and they're going to keep feeding off each other, and we get stuck in these loops. 95%. 95%. Now, you may say, well, that 95% isn't all shame or all negativity or all criticism, except that studies show that 80% of that 95%, so you can do the math and figure out against 100, but 80% of that 95% is negative. And most of that negativity, most of the negative thinking and feeling is going on at a subconscious level, because we have really been gifted psychologically and as human beings with the power to suppress or to repress or to project. In other words, when we have shameful, painful, negative thoughts and feelings, our way of regulating that, our way of dealing with that, is to shut off. There's literally a dorsal switch in the vagus, in the nervous system, what's called a dorsal switch, where you can turn on and off those negative feelings. There's a biological, neurological purpose that happens. There's a psychological defense mechanism that they identified at the beginning of the last century called repressing or minimizing or denying. That's not me. I don't feel that way. I'm not like that. And oftentimes we're exactly like that. Oftentimes that is exactly me. That is exactly us. And we're just stuck in denial with that. And then maybe perhaps the worst one is that we project it. We disown it in ourselves, but it's still there. So we see it in everybody else. And this is probably what Jesus was referring to. This same human psychological phenomena is probably what the scriptures have Jesus referring to when he says, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye when you don't see the plank in your own eye? I mean, think that through for a minute. If I have a plank in my own eye, everybody I look at has a plank. But it's not their plank, it's the plank that's in my own eye. So I see in other people that which I dislike about myself. So we get stuck in these loops, we get stuck in these patterns, and the driver, the motor, is the motivation behind that. And behind that is the core belief or the core purpose or our why. So my point is that whatever we're doing, it has a why connected to it. It has a purpose connected to it, a core purpose. It has a core belief connected to it. And therefore, it makes sense to me that if we want to change that direction, if our wind-up toy life is going in a direction that we don't like, even if it's just because we're bored with it, because we're bored with the same thing over and over and over and over again, or if it's because we keep recycling our pain, we keep recycling our traumas. This is absolutely something that people who have suffered from really traumatic events that have stayed with them, that they continually do until they can get closure for it. They continually recycle that trauma over and over and over again. And so if we want to step out of these loops, if we want to change our behaviors, if we want to change our outcomes, then it's essential that we not only understand our why, but that we consciously choose with purpose, with intention, with consciousness, the why, the belief, the purpose, the cause. So I'm going to say this again at the sake of being too repetitive, at the risk of being too repetitive. Motivation, more often than not, operates below the level of conscious awareness. And when something is outside of our conscious awareness, free will is lost. Unconscious motivators are almost always driven by pain. And therefore, they are related to our ability to regulate ourselves emotionally. I'll give you a simple example. It's a fascinating study. You can see if this fits for you or not. And remember, one study isn't, universal, ubiquitous for every person in every situation, but it's an interesting study. They looked at people who arrive on time or early for events, and they really focused on people who are chronically late. Do you know one of those people? Are you one of those people? Do you find yourself chronically late, even when you don't intend to be late? Like you have made up your mind, I'm going to be on time to that appointment. I'm going to be on time to that meeting. I'm going to be on time to that party. I'm going to be on time to that event. But invariably, something happens. Traffic slows you down. Uh, you had to turn around because you forgot something. Your blow dryer is not working. I don't know, any number of things that become obstacles, but you find this to be a repetitive pattern in your life, not just something that happens once in a while. But even when you intend, even when you set your intention, your why is I'm going to be early, but you find yourself chronically late. That's a behavioral pattern that is in a lot of people. And what this study sought to do was to uncover what it is about that behavioral pattern. What is it that all of these people who are chronically late, what is the thing that they share in common, or what is the cause? What is the purpose? What is the why? And what they found out is really, really fascinating. It's not that people don't want to be on time or that they want to be late or that they set out to be late most of the time consciously. The real issue is that people who are chronically late do not give themselves extra time to get somewhere. They don't leave just a little bit early in case traffic is slow. They don't give themselves extra time, say, to find the parking place. And the reason they don't carve out the extra time, this may surprise you, is because, well, let me say it this way. The reason they're late is because they don't want to be early. It's not that they want to be late, it's that they don't want to be early. And if they give themselves extra time and they don't, and traffic isn't slow, or they don't have to turn around and come back for something, or everything goes smoothly, they might arrive 10 or 15 minutes late because they gave themselves 10 or 15 minutes extra so that they wouldn't be late. Oh my God, if I'm 10 or 15 minutes late, what then? Well, for a lot of people, that suffer from social anxiety. So that's what they found out was a common denominator with a lot of people who are chronically late is that they suffer unconsciously or unbeknownst to themselves oftentimes with social anxiety. And if I'm early to that party or I'm early to that event, I'm going to feel awkward. I'm going to move into what psychologists call the spotlight effect. I'm going to feel like everybody's looking at me and I'm not going to know how to interact or what I'm supposed to say or what I'm supposed to do or where I'm supposed to sit or how I'm supposed to fit in. Used to see this with people a lot in church. I would have people tell me they had been hurt in church. They'd heard about our church. They wanted to try it, but they purposely were like, we're not going to get involved. We're not going to talk to anybody. And so we know if we come early, we're going to have to talk to people. We're going to have to mingle. We're going to have to interact. So they would show up about 5 minutes after the service started. The music's already going. The announcements have already been made and what have you. The music's already going. So there they are late. It alleviates them from their social anxiety. So their why for being late has nothing to do with actually being late. It has to do with avoiding the discomfort and the pain that they will feel based on the social anxiety that they will experience if they are early. So it's just a good example of how our unconscious motives become powerful drivers of our behaviors, right? So it can benefit us then to really honestly, with curiosity and not with judgment, ask ourselves the question, why do I do the things that I do? What is the purpose? What is the cause? that I'm living for, that I'm doing this for? What is the belief that's driving this behavior? Now, I realize that most of us, like me, most of you that watch, at least in this stage of my spiritual evolution, have come out of some kind of restrictive, constricting religious system. Most of us, some form of constricting religious experience or system that centers around Jesus, that centers around Christ, or that is Christian. And so I'm just wondering, like, for each of us, if we each asked ourselves the question, why did I get involved in the first place? That would be an interesting question to ask ourselves. For some of us, the answer might be just like that wind-up toy. I was born into a family. I was drugged to church. I came to church through a drug problem. I was drugged on Sunday mornings. I was drugged on Wednesday nights. I was drugged to weekend retreats and youth group and church camp and all of that stuff. And so maybe that's why we did it. It's because it was the only thing that we were exposed to. Maybe we did it because we were going through a difficult time in our lives, and it gave us some sense of belonging, gave us some sense of meaning, some sense of significance, some sense of purpose. Maybe it was just one of those times in our lives where we're going through an existential crisis and we're looking for meaning and we're looking for purpose, and the church provided us with that. The Bible provided us with that. Religion provided us with that. I don't know. I don't know what your why is. I know my why was I was coming out of a very traumatic family situation. And I was living a very defeated, very powerless life. And I was looking for answers. If I'm really honest, my quest began because I was looking for the power to change my circumstances, to change my situation, to get out of one of these loops of negativity that I was in. And certainly there were aspects, I've talked about it here, where that shame resonated with the shame-based doctrines that I was getting and that I was hearing. But I think I've probably overstated. I mean, it was in there. It affected me. Yes, it was something I needed to deconstruct from. It was something that I needed to move away from in order to be able to spiritually evolve. But now that I'm a little bit more healed on the inside, now that I'm feeling better on the inside, I don't have the same triggers about church. I don't have the same mental and emotional triggers about the name Jesus or the term Christ or Christ consciousness. It doesn't even bother me if that's something that's part of people's spirituality. In fact, I can look at that and say, I think it's beautiful if it's part of their spirituality. There was a time not too long ago that just driving around my town and seeing people go to church was stirring up some unfinished business and negativity in me. And this morning, I'm in this town in the mountains, very religious town, mind you. I can tell just by the flyers and the signs and the churches and all of that stuff. And there was a ton of people that were, flocking into this church that as I was walking to get my coffee. And I was smiling at them. They were smiling back at me. I felt no need whatsoever to have any kind of response at all that wasn't welcoming, warm, kind, and friendly. And for me, that's really big because that lets me know that I've definitely experienced some healing from whatever religious trauma or religious bullshit that I needed to get over in the first place. So why did we get into that? And for you, you may not be able to relate to the religious aspects of it, but maybe there's a area of your life. Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe it was a job. Maybe it was a career that you got into. And some years down the road, you're like, I hate this. Right? Like it's always interesting to me that we are confronted with the decisions that will have the longest lasting effects in our lives. We are confronted by the decisions that will have the longest lasting effects in our lives when we are the least able to, when we have the least amount of experience or wisdom to make those decisions, i.e., what are you going to be when you grow up? You know, I talk to all day long these 18, 19, 20-year-olds that have to pick a major, have to decide what they're going to study, how they're going to prepare for what they are going to be doing with most of their days for the rest of their lives. That's a really big and important decision. A lot of people get married at very young, in their late teens, early 20s. Heck, I would say even in some cases, early 30s might be, you're too young to know that decision or make that decision. Is this the person that I want to spend the rest of my life with? What's life going to be like with this person? And none of us can see the future. But my point is, for you, it might not have been religion. For you, it might have been something else. It might be a career. It might be a marriage. It might be a relationship. And you might have to look at, why did I do this? And you're going to find, if you're honest with yourself, that there was a positive intention. Like in my case, I got into it because I wanted the power to change. I wanted the power to transform. I wanted the power to get out of the situation that I was in. And guess what? My Christian experiences provided me with just that. But then what happens when you no longer need that, you see? When you've outgrown it, just like you outgrow a pair of shoes or a pair of clothing, right? And the beliefs, the ideologies can put so much pressure on you and me, and build up such a stronghold in our lives, especially if it's based on sin, judgment, and redemption. I used to say sin, fall, redemption. I got that from Matthew Fox, but I've been reading Joe Mashuda's stuff lately, and he talks about sin, judgment, and redemption. I like that a lot better than just focusing on the fall. But if your religious experience made you very sin conscious, in other words, it made you think about where you fell short, made you think about where you didn't measure up, made you overthink your choices, overthink your decisions, make too big of a deal out of things that are actually really normal, like losing your temper or having sexual fantasies about someone, or heck, I don't know, whatever kind of mistakes, like the church. I've been away from it for so long, I can't even remember. Like, I wasn't in the Word this week, or I didn't go to church last week, or I forgot to give my tithe this month, or whatever it was. And so you're living under that guilt and that condemnation and that sense of being controlled. And so all of a sudden, the burden outweighs the benefit, right? Great benefit to me. So then why did I deconstruct? Well, I deconstructed out of an encounter, truly, absolutely, out of a meditation encounter that I had. It was funny. I did a podcast on an atheist podcast a couple months ago, and they asked me, how did you deconstruct? And I said, well, it came about as a vision. And they just could not deal with that. Like, a vision? Like, as in you saw something? it was great. I loved it. So, but what was the why? What was the motivation? Well, my why was that I was just going through the motions. I was emotionally disconnected from my life. Frankly, I had outgrown it, like my children outgrowing their size when they go from 8 years old to 14 years old. Like, the shoes they were wearing at 8, they don't fit anymore. It's time to, give those to the ark or give those to someone else. You know what I'm saying? It's like we can outgrow stuff. And so then we have to start over, right? We're starting over. So a few years ago, I made the decision to start over, right? So I had to have a pretty compelling why. I had to have a pretty strong belief, a pretty strong reason, a pretty strong cause to want to start over. So rather than start with why, because you already started, whatever you're doing, you already started. You're already thinking those thoughts repetitively. You're already doing the same behaviors, making the same posts, writing the same blogs. If you're active on social media, and I'm saying this for myself as a micro influencer / content creator, like, why was I making the posts that I was making? For me, now this answer is going to be different for everybody. But for me, that was twofold. Number one, when I started deconstructing early on enough that there wasn't a lot of people talking about. There was a lot of people that had a lot of questions. There was a lot of people that were struggling quite like me. And so I derived a sense of purpose from being outspoken so that other people could sense and understand and realize that they are not alone in their questions. They are not alone in their struggles. They're not alone in wrestling with the answers to those questions, because the answers to those questions are provoking a different way of thinking, a different way of believing, a different way of acting, a different why. So that was part of it. The other part of my why, if I'm honest, was that I was processing, I was healing. Many of you that I connected with, you helped me heal, you helped me grow, you helped me get around the next corner. Some of you were further along in the process or had been at it longer than I had. And what you did was extremely helpful for me. And so I realized that there are some people who find their purpose in being that sort of bridge, if you will, being that sort of life preserver to people who are escaping or leaving Christendom, right? That is a very, very valid and very valuable purpose. It's a very, very valid why, right? So I appreciate that. And I was there once as well. But for me, it got to the point where I personally outgrew that as well, because my why, my purpose changed and transformed. Now, I realize that, these things can be mixed, but I suppose there are some people that their why is they're still entangled. They're still enmeshed. They're still enmeshed with Jesus. They're still enmeshed with Christianity. They're still enmeshed mentally and emotionally with a system that's subtly still controlling them, because it's their focus, it's their obsession. And it's not, for some people, possibly, that they are being a bridge, but that they haven't themselves really, they've gotten stuck in a new feedback loop called deconstruction, a new feedback loop called religious trauma, where I'm only thinking about what was wrong with the system, how toxic it is, how bad it is, how we're moving away from it. Okay, that's one thing if you are sharing your journey as a person who's a little bit further along the path. For others, if you've been blazing that trail, but after a while, you have to ask yourself, where does the trail go? Because perhaps it just keeps circling back around. And that's okay. That's okay. If that's your purpose and your belief and your conscious intention, absolutely. But I think it's important to ask ourselves, are we being driven by purpose, or are we being led around by our pain? Are we being driven by a inspirational, motivational sense of purpose that makes us want to get up in the morning? Or are we being led around by our pain? Has our deconstruction just become an obsessive trauma response or trauma loop that we're stuck in? It's not like someone who broke up or walked away from a toxic relationship, and they're still going to that person's Facebook page trying to see what they're up to. They keep spying on their ex, you know? Sometimes even if they've moved on to another relationship, they still just keep going back, and it's being motivated by pain. It's being motivated by unresolved trauma. It can be motivated by anger. If anger inspires you, if you're inspired by anger, if you get up every morning like, "Argh, and that really gives you a quality of life that you want and that you're choosing consciously, then great. Honestly, I mean that sincerely, great. For some people, anger is a powerful, powerful force and a powerful motivator. And I'm not judging it. I'm not saying that you're wrong to be coming from that place, but are you coming from that place? Is that anger that's motivating you, that's driving you, is it coming from a place of conscious awareness and conscious choice of the belief and the cause that you're serving? Or is it a trauma response where you're still hurting based on, for whatever reason? Um, Maybe you're hurting because you see it hurting other people. That's perfectly valid. A lot of people that are empathic, they see other people and they think that they're hurting and suffering. You know, it's not like, again, to use the relationship analogy, you break up with what you consider to be a toxic person, a narcissistic person that hurt you a lot, and they get involved with someone new, and you look over and you see how this new person is just attaching to them, and you want to warn them and you want to tell them, no, baby, listen, I know it seems great now, but trust me, down the road, it's not going to be so good. You know, he's not going to be so good to you. But how often does that work? Just in relationships, how often does that work? Right. So I think one of the challenges as I'm thinking through this about starting over with my why, I'm really exploring this question. Why do I spend so much time with deconstruction? Why do I make posts or talk about these topics? And if I'm really honest, it's because that's the community now that I'm part of. And I've just discovered, you know, if you talk about spirituality in any kind of positive way, if you talk about Jesus or Christ in any kind of a positive, empowering way, there's a tremendous amount of pushback. So it's easy to just kind of go back into that loop. But is it coming from, wow, I really want to get up this morning and let people know that Jesus sucks? I really want to get up this morning and let people know how bad Christianity is because I think that's really going to help them. No, honestly, it was that for a very short time. So I've really had to look at that, I've really had to examine, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I still haven't fully come to the conclusion yet. I still haven't fully answered that question to myself. It's part of the reason that I'm here. It's part of the reason that I'm away, because I want to start over with why. I want to find that compelling reason. I want to find that compelling purpose. Did a class last week, Unleashing Your Best Self, and it felt so good. And I know it helped people, and the feedback that I got from the students, and there was very little, very, very little in there. In fact, there was nothing in there that was negative. In fact, in one of the sessions, I take the scriptures and use them in a very positive way to help people, and people benefited from that. Is there something wrong with that because I'm using scripture? These are questions that I'm asking myself. Not pointing the finger at anybody else, but I am inviting every single one of us in this group, on this channel, watching this video, or part of this community. What motivates you to keep doing what you're doing? Is it coming from a sense of fiery passion and purpose that you're making a difference in the world, that makes you happy, that makes you fulfilled? Is it fulfilling something in you? Are you being driven by a fulfilling and compelling, motivating purpose? Or are you being led around by your pain and unresolved issues? And if that's the case, I'd like to help you resolve that pain. I'd like to help you resolve that issue. But we cannot ever be free from that which we refuse to look at. Same thing as religion, right? Like we're afraid to look at honest questions about, like I said earlier, the problem of evil. Honest questions about the validity and reliability of scripture. honest questions about why are we doing this in the first place. We don't want to make that same mistake. I don't want to see you make that same mistake. We just keep consuming content that's angry and critical, divisive. Because at the end of the day, it's just as divisive. It can be just as controlling. When we have a compulsion to tell people your experience isn't your experience, that you're no different than the people in the church. You're exactly like the people in the church that say, no, the experience isn't this, it's this, because the Bible says, right? So if I were to tell you that in meditation, not too long ago, see, one of the things I learned about, no, I'm not going to share that. Let's just suppose I'm in meditation. And one of the ways I like to meditate, I meditate a lot of different ways, is sort of a free flow of image, allowing the image to communicate and to express itself. If you're familiar with the work of Carl Jung, very similar to what Carl Jung was doing in the Red Book. It's one of my favorite ways to meditate. And the really important thing in this form of meditation is to not use what Ingo Swann called, I like this term, analytical overlay. What is analytical overlay? Well, I start to dream something while I'm awake. I start to allow this spontaneous flow of images, and then something shows up that doesn't fit with my current paradigm or understanding. I don't know what it means, and because the brain has these pattern recognition neurons that demand closure immediately, and this is coming outside of the pattern. See, this is really important. If what I'm thinking and feeling is 95% the same all the time, then this type of meditation, along with dream work and dream analysis, gives me the opportunity for new learnings. It gives me the opportunity for growth. It gives me the opportunity to evolve. Because remember last week, if you watched, I said when learning is happening, in order for us to be the student, there's a level of passivity. We have to be passive. We have to be at rest. We have to be open. We have to be vulnerable. We have to be responsive, and then receiving the transmission of the information from the teacher. That's exactly why every dream is teaching us something. Because our dreams, wherever they come from, are teaching us something always, and our dreams are always benevolent. It's always towards our benefit, right? Well, you don't have to be asleep to dream. You can do this awake, just surrendering to this flow of images. But you got to watch out for analytical overlays. So let's just suppose that I'm having this meditative experience, and all of a sudden, a figure that I identify as Jesus shows up in that dream, shows up in that vision. We can have the temptation, because there's so much pressure not to believe in Jesus that comes, subtle pressure, but it's there, that, oh my gosh, I can't, oh my gosh, that's evil, that's wrong. Oh, get behind me, Satan, or get behind me, Jesus. Right? Take that kind of analytical overlay and put it there so that we're locked into thinking the same thoughts we've always thought over and over and over and over, instead of allowing this element, allowing the vision to unfold, and allowing for the element of surprise, allowing for it to teach us, allowing for it to nudge us. It's interesting because the Hebrew word for dream can mean to restore to health. It's one of the ways I was able to heal my heart problem, was I did a tremendous amount of dream work. And I would say most of the healing that I experienced, aside from the physical and natural stuff that I did, which I feel like was a very small percentage of it, the vast majority of it came out of dream work. But see, you can't really do analytical overlay on your dreams unless you can lucid dream. And to be honest with you, that's not necessarily a good thing. It can be, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with lucid dreaming, but some people in the dream world, if you will, have made lucid dreaming like the end all be all. But anyway, I'm digressing a lot. So, but then here's my point. So then if someone says, I had an experience with Jesus, I channeled a message from Jesus, Jesus showed up to me in a dream or showed up to me in a vision, and I come back with, well, that probably wasn't Jesus. Or I come back with, well, that was probably just the higher self. If I come back with anything other than affirming that person's experience, I'm just like I was in religion. Imagine if someone showed up to your Christian church and said, Yogananda came to me in a vision, or the Prophet Muhammad came to me in a vision, or my God, the being Lucifer came to me in a vision. Oh my God, immediately we'd start telling them how wrong they were, how deceived they are, how bad that is, how they need to get away from that. Right? Well, we can end up doing the same thing, gang, when people are talking about Jesus and we come at them. No, it's not Jesus. If you're clinging to Jesus, there's an unhealed self there. I mean, sadly, I had to block someone that I considered a very dear friend because one evening, and none of you would have saw it probably, but in the New Day Global group, went on a vicious attack at a person, tagging them in a post to the whole group, not in the comments, not in the comment section, but going into the group, typing in the person's name, tagging them, making a post to the whole group, and then shitting on them about their experience. And I'm sorry, I am absolutely not going to put up with that. I don't care how sweet you look or how nice you look or how you come across, how spiritual you come across. There's no reason for that. I cannot find any reason in the world, in any sense of the word, that is coming from a positive place. No. So anyway, my point is, like, we end up gaslighting. We're just as much gaslighting people for their religious experience, if it's spiritual, as the church is gaslighting people for not having those religious experiences. We got to be careful that we're not buying into and winding up the same energy and just recycling it over and over and over again. And so what's the way out? What's the way out? The way out is, honestly, just like anything else, we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. We have to be willing to tell ourselves the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We have to be willing to examine, what is the emotion? What is the feeling? Is it uplifting? Is it empowering? Is it inspiring? If it is it satisfying? Is it that feeling of satisfaction that you get? Is it an uplifting feeling? Then go for it. When you're consuming the content over and over and over and over and over and over, liking and loving and sharing over and over and over the same content, is it empowering you? Is it benefiting you? Is it giving you life? I'm asking sincerely. I'm asking honestly, because I'm on this quest of starting over with why. Right? So it may seem like I'm pointing the finger. I'm not pointing the finger, I promise. I'm asking genuinely and sincerely for myself and inviting you to do the same. Because I'd like to know. I can assure you this: if I decide to continue to do stuff like this, if I decide to continue to create content, I want it to come from a really good why. A really good why. A why that makes me want to get up in the morning. And I may discover that this version of myself is another version that I've outgrown. I may decide I don't want to do any of this anymore. I may decide I don't want to do social media anymore. I don't know. So your feedback, is helpful. What is it? But it's got to be honest feedback, which means it's got to start with being honest with yourself, right? So is it coming from that place of purpose, or is it being led by anger, being led by pain? And honestly, that's okay too. It's okay if you're raging against the machine. It's okay if you're doing it because you're hurt and you need to keep doing it as part of your healing process. But my question is it leading you to real healing? Is it leading you to real satisfaction? Or for some of us, have we become like a group that just sits around the office cooler and gripes about the last employee that was there, or gossips about the last employee that we didn't like because we get some kind of dopamine hit off of doing that? Now, here's the really good news, and this is where I'll finish. If you say to yourself, I'm doing this from pain, I'm doing this from anger, Aaron, you're hitting me right between the eyes. It's exactly what I'm doing. I'm consuming this content over and over again because just for the dopamine hits, or just because I'm so angry about what happened to me still. Then might I propose taking a different approach? Might I suggest there's nothing wrong with it? Keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to stop consuming the content or making the content or being angry or being inspired to do that particular thing. Not at all. But if you find that I'm being led by my pain in doing this, I'm not saying you have to stop, but I'm saying, how about considering adding something to it? And that would begin with why. That would begin with why. Now, here's the great thing about why. The great thing about consciously choosing a why is you can look at all kinds of options and you can decide on the one that best fits you and best suits you in this season of your life. Someone recently made a comment. I think it's important that there's no rules when it comes to grief. And it's important that we give people space to grieve how they choose to grieve. That's absolutely correct. And there are a lot of people coming out of religion that are grieving and that are still grieving. And there's no right or wrong way to grieve. But it is possible to get stuck in grief, to stay in grief, rather than walk through the stages of grief. So all grief is a transitional process to help us let go of what was and embrace what now is, to let go of life before and embrace the life after. It's an emotional adaptive mechanism and process that we psychologically walk through to help us absorb change. It's adaptive. It's an adaptive process. And healthy grief, however you do it, leaves you adapted. It does not leave you in a continuous loop and process of adapting. So I would suggest looking out at a future version of yourself, a future you, and asking yourself, because right now in the present, you're custom designing your future with your choices if you do it with awareness, with free will, and with consciousness. Looking out into a future version of yourself and saying, what do I want that future version of me to be? What do I want it to look like? And if it's the same as today, awesome, fantastic, genuinely keep doing what you're doing. But if you look out and you want something different, you want something else, you want something better, you want a new and improved version of you, there's nothing wrong at all with wanting to improve. There's nothing at all wrong with wanting to change and to grow. Nothing at all. It doesn't mean that you haven't arrived at life any more than it means someone else has arrived because they don't want to change. But I know for me going forward, whatever I do going forward, whatever I decide, whatever that future version of me looks like, and I want to move towards and grow towards and evolve into, I want it to be more inclusive. I want it to be more inclusive. I want to be able to include people who find value in their faith. I want to be able to include people who feel spiritually connected to Jesus. I want to be able to include that group. I want to be able to include those people. I want to be able to include people who don't believe in God or spirituality at all, in any way, shape, or form. And that's a challenge, isn't it? Because it's such a divisive issue, especially in our culture, especially the way political power has coalesced around faith in the last, well, I don't know, probably hasn't been recent, in the last 50 years, I'd say. That's a challenge. And maybe it's not possible, but I suspect that that will end up being part of my why. All right. Well, thank you for letting me ramble on here and just kind of think and share out loud. Let me see um, if there's any comments. I'm not seeing any. Let me look here. Yeah. So I don't know. I'll go back and check again. This apparently this platform. I don't know if it doesn't. Who knows? At any rate, hope y'all are doing well. Hope you appreciated and enjoyed this. If I rubbed the cat's fur the wrong way, please forgive me, and I'll try to rub it the right way the next time. So anyway, bless you. Hope you have a great and wonderful rest of your day, rest of your weekend, and rest of your week. And I will keep you updated on how this journey goes for me.